Small cell, honey supercell, and foundationless frames are some of the most useful tools you have available to help you manage mites and other hive problems. In this video, we're going to go over a very brief history of how large foundation cell sizes became what they are today, and that's coming right up. Hi, I'm Scott McPherson, and this is Beekeeping from Scratch, where it's about the bees. Hey there, beekeepers. Welcome to Beekeeping from Scratch, where we document our journey, starting over from scratch and bringing our operations back to profitability together with you. Now, if we haven't met yet, my name is Scott McPherson, and this is the 5th installment of my show, Nothing But Bees, where we discuss theoretical beekeeping topics such as history, core concepts, myths, and issues facing our bees. If you have watched a few Beekeeping from Scratch videos, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell icon so that you are notified the moment we upload our next video. Your subscribership and viewing these videos all the way to the end really helps out this channel by getting this material in front of other beekeepers and people interested in bees. Just about 150 years ago, Bee Comb Foundation had its debut, and along with it came the ability to somewhat choose the size of comb that the bees built and raised their brood in. Early producers and experimenters tested with cell sizes ranging from the ludicrously small to the ludicrously large and found what the bees would accept. Additionally, it was posed by a few experimenters that a large honeybee would be able to gather more honey and nectar from sources that were previously unavailable. Historically important beekeepers like AI root, HI root, Pinchot, Badeau, Jerzon, and Guntarski all for the most part believed that a larger bee would be able to produce more honey. The roots seemed more concerned about bee acceptance of comb foundation, while the others seemed more interested in productivity. And from these experiments, standard foundation was born. While their hypotheses proved to be true from very specific and very limited points of view, the experiments in cell size enlargement ended up largely being learned not to be productive as originally posed. The measurements and results of Jerzon and others were challenged by Dr. Park and Roy Grout of the Iowa State College in 1930. There they showed that while the bee could be artificially enlarged with larger cells, that certain important measurements of the bee remained relatively unchanged or not noteworthy. For instance, Jerzon's assertion that tongue length of the bee was lengthened in proportion to overall body mass and therefore able to reach nectar deeper into flowers was disproven. It was additionally speculated that the larger bee became out of tune with the flora that the bees were naturally inclined to forage. It should additionally be noted that while AI Root was coming up with his own cell size to better mimic natural comb, he seemed to cite that natural worker comb was one uniform size, while in actuality we know it's a good range of cell sizes. Even as early as a 1937 edition of Bee World, natural worker cell sizes were recorded with vastly different sizes. Today, we know through simple observation that a swarm given foundationless frames, top bars, or other system that doesn't constrain the length of the comb, that the bees start building comb on the larger side around 5.2 millimeters along the top bar, and then as the comb grows downward, the cell sizes begin to shrink. When we measure where the core brood nest would be found on a comb, the cell sizes in the core brood nest tend to not be any larger than 4.9 or 4.8 millimeters. And they continue to get smaller the lower on the comb that you measure. The cells at the top of the comb tend to get backfilled with honey and stay backfilled, since the bees naturally like to keep honey above their brood nest. I personally have seen comb in my own beehives when the bees have been allowed to continuously draw their own comb and replace it over time, cell sizes as small as 4.6 millimeters. Michael Bush also indicates that he has seen cell sizes as small as 4.6 millimeters in his hives as well. Others have loosely reported seeing cells even smaller than that, and although I believe that's true, I think that that is the extreme and is probably limited to the very lowest edges of combs that are not constrained by a bottom bar or floor of the beehive. So now the question becomes, if we know that normal foundation of 5.2 to 5.4 millimeters is artificially large for the brood nest and has no real benefit, and indeed is potentially making things worse for colony health, why does it continue to be the default foundation? If you want to see how large cell foundation may be making your hives less healthy, please check out this link above and at the end of this video. If you look at any bee supply catalog or web store, you will discover that you could probably buy small cell foundation from them, but it's likely to be more expensive, and additionally, you're likely to read a caveat that says that small cell foundation is only for advanced or experienced beekeepers only. Thankfully, my favorite supplier, Betterbee, has no such caveat or warning in the description. However, you could still expect to pay the normally higher price tag. So again, why is large cell still the default, and why is small cell still so expensive? Well, that's the result of simple supply and demand. For whatever reason, even though the entire beekeeping community at large is aware cell sizes were enlarged in the beginning periods of foundation development, people in general are resistant to change. If the paradigm were to flip and small cell became the most demanded foundation product, suppliers would be forced to retool their high-volume foundation mills at an extremely high cost. That's why I suspect suppliers place that warning in their descriptions, because they want to avoid mass adoption and the resulting need to retool their equipment. If people started buying more small cell foundation, suppliers would eventually retool all their mills, but the cost of all foundation, would probably be more expensive for a number of years. So in many ways, from an economic point of view, it seems undesirable to make that switch, since large cell seems to work just fine as far as most people are concerned. However, what's missing from the economic equations is if small cell really does have an impact on hive health and longevity, a fact which does seem to be resisted by many, but becomes an inevitable conclusion once an operation properly makes the switch. The cost of retooling the foundation industry is probably less than the cost of doing business status quo over the long term. Everyone would benefit from small cell becoming the de facto standard. Ideally, foundationless comb becoming the standard would be even better, but the need for foundation will never entirely go away, especially for those that rely on honey production as their source of income. So we've gone over a very brief history of how foundation came to be, how faulty experimentation erroneously led to large cell foundation becoming the industry de facto standard, and why it's so hard for the industry to make the switch. I recommend, if you're interested to learn how small cell and foundationless frames will benefit your operation, please click on the link that's coming up in just a moment.